St. Petersburg, 1904. As snow powdered the frozen Neva, and the winter palace windows glowed with the firelight of Tsar Nicholas II's glittering New Year's court. The air inside the malachite hall shimmered with perfume and candlelight, the sound of boots on marble drowned beneath strings and brass. Velvet and brocade rustled as courtiers bowed and swayed, their eyes sharp behind masks of civility. But beyond the waltzes and jeweled uniforms, a woman in a sapphire gown stood stiff at the edge of the throng, her gloved fingers clenched around a fan she hadn't opened once all evening. Valeska Sinclair, American-born widow of a Russian general and 41 years old this winter, had not danced in 15 seasons. She had returned to court only because the Empress Dowager had summoned her more out of obligation than affection. Valeska had once been the foreign bride who shocked the Russian elite by marrying into the empire late in life. Now, with her husband gone 2 years and her only son estranged somewhere in the Caucasus, she was a relic in silk. I was told the winter court had grown colder, she murmured, not looking at the man who had stopped beside her. But I didn't expect it to be so literal. I find the older ice is the strongest. It doesn't crack as easily, said a voice low, amused, and unmistakably American. She turned sharply. The man beside her was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair swept back without vanity. His uniform marked him not as Russian, but as a foreign attaché navy blue with gold piping. His eyes, pale gray, held no mockery, only interest. "Do I know you?" Valeska asked, uncertain. "Not yet. Nathaniel Keaton, naval liaison to the Tsar's Arctic fleet. I arrived last week." He offered a bow more respectful than courtly. "Your accent gave you away. I'm told you're the only woman here who still calls a carriage a buggy." Valeska's eyes narrowed. "I haven't been called that in years." "Then I've done you a disservice," Nathaniel said, lifting his gaze to the chandeliers. "I only meant you sound like home." She didn't smile, but a corner of her mouth twitched. "Home is a long way off." "Not tonight," he said, and offered his arm. "Would you walk with me?" Valeska hesitated. She hadn't accepted an arm since her husband's funeral. But the court was watching, and she hated being pitted more than being whispered about. "I'll walk," she said, "but I won't dance." He nodded. "Fair trade." They stepped out into the corridor, her heels clicking softly on inlaid floors. The air cooled as they turned into the gallery of war, lined with portraits of generals long dead. Valeska stopped before one, her eyes lingering on the face of her late husband, General Dmitry Sokolov, painted in his youth. "He was younger than you, there," she said. Nathaniel glanced at the portrait. "He looks like a man who expected to win every battle." "He did, until the one that mattered." Her voice didn't waver. "Does duty ever get easier?" "No," Nathaniel said. "But it gets quieter. You start hearing your own thoughts again." They walked in silence down the corridor, past frosted windows and flickering lamps. When they reached the end, Valeska paused, her breath misting. "I won't be paraded again," she said suddenly. "They want to marry me off to some cousin of the Grand Duke. I'm too old to be useful, but not old enough to be harmless." "I'm not here to parade you," Nathaniel said. "And I don't think you're harmless." She looked at him, startled. "You don't know me. I know what it looks like when someone's trying not to drown." His eyes were steady. "I've seen that look on sailors in the Bering Sea. You hold your breath too long, and eventually, something has to give." Valeska drew herself up. "I'm not drowning." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled something wrapped in oilskin. "A letter. I shouldn't be giving you this, but I think you deserve to know." He handed it to her. "Your son, Mikhail." He sent it to the Admiralty in Vladivostok. It was never forwarded. Her hand shook as she took the packet. "You read my name in it." "No. He wrote yours so precisely I thought it was a forged address. I asked the court librarian. She directed me to you." Valeska turned away, throat tight. The letter was dated 4 months ago. Her son had been alive still was, perhaps, and she hadn't known. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "Because I know what it's like to be forgotten by the people you still love." She faced him then, truly faced him. His eyes weren't pleading, only steady, like someone who'd stood in storms and come through. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded once. "If you'd like help replying, I know someone discreet." "You?" "I was a tutor once. Briefly. Before the Navy." His mouth curved. "Not very good at it. But I can keep a secret." A laugh escaped her, quiet and sudden. You're full of surprises, Mr. Keaton. Just Nathaniel. And only when it matters. That night, as snow fell heavier on the palace eaves, Valeska lit a candle in her private chamber and read Mikhail's letter 3 times. The boy the man was alive in Kars, working with an Armenian doctor to treat wounded farmers. He asked for forgiveness, but more than that, he asked if she remembered the way the orchard smelled in spring. She wrote back by morning. 2 days later, the Empress Dowager summoned her again. A marriage proposal had been suggested. Count Orlov, a widower with estates near Smolensk. Valeska declined. Firmly. She's refusing again, one courtier whispered as she passed. She thinks herself above it, another said. She's grieving still, the first murmured. But Valeska's steps were sure, her spine straight. Nathaniel waited in the antechamber, coat in hand. You declined him. And I'll decline the next. Her cheeks were pink with cold. Are you walking? If you are. They walked the palace gardens, where the frost had turned every branch silver. When she slipped on a patch of ice, he caught her elbow. His hand was warm through her glove. You've done more than you should, she said quietly. You gave me back my son. No, he said. He gave himself back. I just made sure the letter reached the right hands. She stopped walking. Why? He looked at her, and the easy charm fell away. Because I think you've been carrying too much alone, and I want to help carry some of it. If you'll let me. Her breath caught. You're a foreigner. A naval officer. I'm a widow of a general. Do you know what kind of scandal that would be? I do. And still. I'm not afraid of scandal. Are you? She didn't answer. But she didn't walk away, either. From a window above, a lady in waiting watched them. They're saying she's taken a secret tutor. For what? Someone laughed. For her heart, the lady said, and turned away. The sky above St. Isaac's Cathedral had gone the color of pewter, the sun already lost behind a veil of clouds by the time Valeska stepped out of the carriage. Her cloak, black wool lined with fox fur, snapped in the wind as she crossed the square toward the Foreign Ministry building. The invitation had arrived sealed in violet wax, bearing the crest of the Imperial Navy's diplomatic corps. A reception quiet, unofficial, and more interesting for its lack of ceremony. The interior was less grand than the palace, but warmer. Fires snapped in the grates, and the smell of pipe smoke and ink lingered in the carved wooden corridors. She was escorted toward the East Wing, where a gathering of foreign officers occupied a drawing room filled with maps and low conversation. No orchestra, no gowns, just uniforms and the low hum of strategy. Nathaniel stood near a brass samovar, speaking to a Prussian captain in flawless German. A glass of tea steamed in his hand, his shoulders relaxed beneath the fit of his coat. When he saw her, his expression didn't shift, but he stepped aside as if by instinct, leaving space for her beside him. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said once she reached him. I wasn't sure I should, she replied. Did you read it? She nodded. Twice. I almost didn't recognize my own name on the invitation. I thought it might feel less suffocating than another evening of brocade and chamber music. She glanced around the room. Fewer pearls. More dispatches. Do you miss it? He asked. I miss the clarity, she said, accepting the cup he poured her. In war, you knew what mattered. Now everything is a negotiation wrapped in etiquette. Nathaniel tilted his head. And yet you still navigate it. I was taught to survive before I was taught to be admired. That's a rare education. Not rare. Just not often valued at court. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small envelope, unsealed. Another letter, he said. This one came through the embassy in Tiflis. It's addressed to you, but it was sent under my name. I thought you'd rather have it in private. She accepted it, her fingers brushing his. You're taking a risk. I'm not stationed here for diplomacy. His voice lowered. I'm here to observe the fleet's coordination with the Far East. That gives me access most don't know I have. If I use it for something good, it feels less like espionage. Your command knows? They prefer not to ask. She tucked the letter into her sleeve. You're not what I expected. I'm not sure what I am, sometimes. He looked past her, toward the frosted windows. My last post was in Nome. I spent most evenings teaching arithmetic to whalers who couldn't read tide charts. I thought I was helping. Then one of them drowned trying to reach the ice fields in the dark. You weren't responsible for his choices. No, but I still wonder if I should have taught him something else instead. She studied him a moment. You carry that with you. I carry what I couldn't fix. They stood in silence as the fire snapped. The room had begun to thin, the other officers drifting out in pairs, voices fading into the corridor. "You said once that duty gets quieter," she said finally. "Has it?" He looked at her then. "Only when I'm with you." She looked away, the admission striking something deep in her chest. "I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything. I've spent years being watched, judged. Every decision weighed against what's acceptable. And I've spent years in places where no one knew who I was, where it didn't matter if I said the wrong thing." She turned back to him. "That sounds like freedom." "It is. But it's lonely too." The firelight threw warm shadows across his face, catching on the fine lines at the corners of his mouth. She reached up, unfastening the clasp at her throat. The fox fur slipped from her shoulders, revealing the dark velvet beneath. "I don't want to be a scandal." "Then we won't be one. But I want to choose. Not be chosen for." "I want that too." She stepped closer, her voice low. "Then don't ask for anything. Not yet. Just stay." He didn't move. "I will." Later that evening, she returned to her apartment off the Nevsky Prospect, where her housekeeper, Katya, had left the lamps burning low and tea warming on the stove. She undressed slowly, placing the letter on her escritoire without opening it. She sat, hands folded, staring at the familiar curve of her son's handwriting. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. She broke the seal. Mikhail's words were less hesitant this time. He spoke of a girl he had met, a nurse from Erzurum, who read poetry aloud to the wounded. He wrote of snowfall in the mountains and how he had begun carving spoons to pass the time. He asked about the orchard again, and at the bottom, in careful script, he wrote, "If you are well, write. If you are not, still write." Valeska pressed the page to her chest. The next morning, she walked to the Admiralty Garden, where Nathaniel waited near the statue of Peter the Great. She offered no greeting, only handed him a folded reply. "I'll make sure it reaches him," he said. "I know." He looked at her hands, then at her. "Are you cold?" "No," she said. "Not anymore." The soles of Valeska's boots pressed into the thin crust of snow covering the quay as she stepped from the sleigh, the frozen river ahead lying still as poured lead. Ice creaked beneath the hulls of moored supply barges, and a sharp wind off the Gulf of Finland worked its way past her collar. But she didn't flinch. She had agreed to meet Nathaniel here, not in the shelter of a drawing room, but beneath the open sky, on the naval docks where the Baltic breathed frost and iron. He was already waiting, coat buttoned to the throat, cap tucked under one arm. The blue of his uniform stood out against the gray, his posture straight but not rigid. "You weren't followed?" he asked without greeting. "I don't attract attention anymore," she said. "That's the luxury of being forgotten." "I wouldn't call it that." She stepped beside him, her eyes moving to the icebreakers anchored in the harbor. "Why here?" "Because I needed to show you something." He gestured toward the nearest ship, a squat, smoke-blackened vessel with a reinforced prow and a deck lined with coal bins. "That's the Poktusov. She leaves for Murmansk in 4 days. I've been assigned a berth." Valeska's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't let it show. This wasn't mentioned in the last dispatch. It wasn't finalized until this morning. "I came straight from the Admiralty." "How long?" "Until the thaw. Maybe longer. Depends on what they find in the White Sea." He paused. "I didn't want you to hear it from someone else." She turned only slightly, her voice low. "And what would you have me do with this knowledge? Prepare a farewell toast?" "No," his voice softened. "I want you to decide if this is something you want to continue. Because if it isn't, if the quiet we found can't grow into something solid, then I'd rather leave knowing I gave you the choice." Around them, the harbor groaned under the shifting weight of ice. A gull cried overhead, then vanished into the steel-colored sky. "I don't make decisions in cold air," she said finally. "Or on dockyards. There's a place I go sometimes," he said. "Near the Smolny convent. A greenhouse behind the rector's house. No one thinks to look there in winter." "Why a greenhouse?" "Because it's warm," he said. "And I like the sound of things that grow where they shouldn't." That afternoon, she sent a note through Katya to the rector's house. The response came in the form of a drawn curtain and an unlocked side gate. Inside the greenhouse, the air was thick with the scent of damp soil and citrus. Valeska stepped between rows of lemon trees and clay pots, the glass panes overhead dusted with frost. Nathaniel was bent over a wooden bench near the back, sleeves rolled to his forearms, coaxing a small orchid into a new pot. "I thought you were a sailor." she said. He didn't look up. I grew up over a stable behind a Unitarian church. My mother kept geraniums in coffee tins. She moved closer, the scent of loam and peelings grounding her. Why do this yourself? Because it keeps my hands busy. And because I've spent too many winters breaking things. I needed to learn how to mend something. She reached for a lemon, small and green, not yet ripe. Her fingers brushed the waxy skin. You asked me to decide. I did. But you've already decided. He looked up then, eyes steady. I've decided that you matter. Whether I stay or go. And what if I said I couldn't ask you to remain? Then I'd go knowing I wasn't a regret. She turned from the tree, hands folding at her waist. I've lived through 2 wars. I've buried a husband. I've stood in rooms where my name was used as a warning. And I've made peace with silence. But I don't want more silence. He stepped forward, leaving the pot behind. Neither do I. I don't know what this is, she said. But I know I want to find out. Not at the edges of things, but in the center. We still have 4 days. Then we use them. He reached for her hand, and this time, she let him take it. The following evening, they walked together along the Fontanka, the canal half frozen, lights from the townhouses flickering on the water's uncertain surface. Nathaniel carried a folded sheet of music under his arm, and when they reached the second bridge, he handed it to her. It's an arrangement of a sea shanty, he said, set for cello and piano. I heard you once played. Years ago, she said, unfolding the staff lines. Where did you find this? I wrote to a friend who teaches at the conservatory. He remembered your performance from before the war. She ran her fingers over the staves. I didn't know anyone still did. I don't forget what matters. That night, she practiced for the first time in over a decade. The cello's strings groaned under her fingers at first, but slowly, muscle memory returned. By morning, the melody had shape again. 3 days later, she stood on the quay once more, this time with a parcel in hand. Inside was the copied arrangement, tied with blue ribbon. For the Paktusov's mess hall, she said. Nathaniel took it carefully. They'll think we're becoming civilized. They'll be wrong. He hesitated. When I return, you'll call at my door, she said, and I'll ask if you brought lemons. He smiled not widely, not for show, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knew the shape of her voice now, and the steadiness beneath it. As the ship pulled away, she stood without waving, her figure still against the gray. Only when the vessel slipped behind the breakwaters did she turn toward the city, her steps sure, her path already chosen. The snow had begun to recede from the rooftops by the time the first letter from Murmansk arrived. It came not through diplomatic courier, but in the hands of a merchant's clerk traveling from Arkhangelsk, tucked inside a ledger of wool invoices. Valeska received it in the rear salon of the Smolny Institute, where she had taken to spending her afternoons reading aloud to the daughters of minor nobility, too young for court, but too old for nursery. The girl beside her, a pale thing with a stubborn stammer, was tracing the edge of a page when the footman entered with the sealed envelope. It's foreign, he said, offering it without ceremony. She turned it over. The seal was waxless, the ink faintly smudged from damp. But the script was unmistakable, careful and compressed, as if each word had been weighed before chosen. She folded it into her coat without opening it, then turned back to the girl with the stammer and said, "Begin again, from the line about the frost." That evening, she read the letter by lamplight in her dressing room, seated before the cheval mirror where her maid had left her hairpins in a small dish. The writing was brief, but the content precise. The Paktusov had broken into open water earlier than expected. The crew had taken on supplies from Finnish whalers. The northern lights had been visible for 5 nights in a row. At the end, the final line read, "I have begun counting time by the length of your silence." She refolded the letter, slid it between the pages of a travelogue on Lapland, and stood for a long while before the window, watching the slush dull the shine of the street lamps below. 3 mornings later, she found herself summoned this time not by the Empress Dowager, but by Her Excellency Countess Lebedeva, mistress of the robes. The summons was terse, the location curious. Not the palace, but the state millinery house beside the Moika Canal. When Valeska arrived, the countess was seated beneath a collection of feathers and netted veils, her hands folded over a portfolio of fabric samples. "I'll be direct," the countess said, without rising. "The court intends to host a spring masquerade. You will attend." I wasn't aware my presence was required. Valeska replied, removing her gloves. It isn't, but it is advisable. Advisable for whom? The Countess's expression did not shift. There are rumors, and while we do not dignify rumors with comment, we do counter them with visibility. You will wear something appropriate. You will appear unbothered. And you will dance. Valeska's jaw tightened. I see. You have always been adaptable, the Countess said, her fingers brushing a length of lavender silk. Now is not the time to abandon that talent. When Valeska exited onto the canal, the wind had lost its bite. Children were tossing crumbs to birds along the embankment, and the sky had taken on a pale, watery blue. She walked without destination, steps slowing only once she reached the gate of the conservatory. Inside, the practice rooms hummed softly with scales and arpeggios. She passed a pair of students rehearsing a Haydn duet, then turned toward the archives. The conservator, a man with a crooked wrist and a fondness for forgotten scores, looked up from his desk when she entered. I need a piece, she said. For a dance. Something unfamiliar. He blinked. Waltz? Mazurka? Something that doesn't fit neatly. He considered this, then drew a sheaf of notation from a folio marked Eastern themes. He handed her a composition attributed to a Polish émigré, recently deceased, never performed at court. It's not what they'll expect, he said. That's the point. That evening, she wrote her reply to Nathaniel. She kept it brief. A description of the thawed garden paths near Alexander Park, the return of the market vendors to the square, a child she'd overheard reciting Pushkin from memory. At the bottom, she added, I have begun counting time by the weight of your absence. Come back before the counting becomes habit. She gave the letter to Katia, who knew whom to trust at the shipping yard. The masquerade arrived with the first true warmth of spring. The palace's marble floors had been cleared of carpets, and the windows thrown open so the scent of damp earth and melting snow could drift inside. Valeska arrived late, unmasked, wearing a gown of dusk blue shot through with silver thread. She ignored the glances. She ignored the whispers. She danced the unfamiliar waltz with a young cavalry lieutenant who confessed, breathless, that he had never heard the melody before. I imagine it's foreign, he said. It is, she replied, and stepped away before he could ask more. She did not stay long. As she passed through the vestibule, she caught sight of Countess Lebedeva watching from the upper balcony, expression unreadable beneath her half-mask of black lace. In the days that followed, she returned to the greenhouse. The rector's house had taken in a seamstress's orphan, a boy of 8 who followed her through the lemon trees and asked if she was a queen. She told him no, but she had met a king once, and he had smelled of salt and ink. The boy asked if kings could get lost. Only if they want to be found, she said. That night, a second letter arrived. This one was shorter, written in haste, the paper creased along the edges. The Paktusov had been recalled. The fleet was returning early. He would arrive within the week. He would come to the greenhouse. She pressed the letter to her chest, not out of habit, but because her heart had quickened in a way it had not in years. The next morning, she returned to the rector's house, lemon blossom scent thick in the air. She swept the greenhouse floor clean, polished the brass watering cans, and trimmed back the frost-burnt leaves. Then she sat on the bench where he had once repotted an orchid, waiting not as a woman abandoned, but as one who had chosen to stay rooted.